The black SUVs moved through the neighborhood like sharks through shallow water. 3 of them, windows tinted so dark they seemed to swallow the morning light. They rolled past the corner store where Mrs. Henderson sold lottery tickets, past the barbershop where old men argued about basketball, past the community garden where tomatoes grew in defiant rows against the concrete. Then they stopped. The bakery stood at the end of Maple Street, its pink awning faded but still cheerful, its window display still showing the same hand-painted sign it had shown for 40 years, Carter's Bakery, made with love. Since 1985. The building should have been demolished 3 months ago. Should have been rubble by now, making way for the luxury condos that would price everyone in the neighborhood into memory. But it was still standing. And Chairman Kong was tired of waiting. The first SUV's door opened. A man emerged, then another, then 6 more. They wore black suits that cost more than most people on this street. Made in 3 months. But it was the man who stepped out last who made the watching neighbors pull their children inside and lock their doors. Chairman Kong didn't look like a monster. He looked like a businessman. Silver-haired and composed, his shoes polished to mirrors, his tie perfectly knotted. But everyone knew what he was. Everyone knew what happened to people who stood in his way. He walked toward the bakery with the confidence of a man who had never been told no. His men flanked him, silent, professional. One of them carried a briefcase. Another had his hand resting inside his jacket. Kong stopped at the door, straightened his cuffs, and pushed it open. The bell above the door chimed, cheerful and oblivious. Inside, the smell of fresh bread mingled with cinnamon and vanilla. The display cases held croissants, muffins, glazed donuts arranged in careful rows. Behind the counter stood a young woman with flour on her apron, her hair pulled back in a ponytail, her eyes widening as she recognized the man in the doorway. She stepped back. Her hand moved toward her phone. "Don't," Kong said quietly. His voice was soft, almost gentle. That made it worse somehow. "Where is Mrs. Carter?" "I'm right here." The voice came from the kitchen doorway. Mrs. Evelyn Carter stepped into view, wiping her hands on a dishcloth. 73 years old, 5 feet 2 inches of quiet dignity in a floral dress and sensible shoes. She'd buried a husband, raised a daughter, lost that daughter to cancer. And then raised her granddaughter alone for 17 years. She'd survived urban renewal, gentrification, 3 recessions, and more heartbreak than most people experience in 2 lifetimes. She looked at Chairman Kong with the same expression she'd give a difficult stain. "Mrs. Carter," Kong said, inclining his head slightly. "You've made this very difficult." "That's my job," she replied. "Making things difficult for men who think they can take what doesn't belong to them." One of Kang's men shifted forward. Kong raised a hand, stopping him. Without looking. "You've been served notice. Multiple times. You've been offered compensation. More than fair compensation." He paused. "This property will be demolished today. You have 1 hour to remove your belongings." "No." The word hung in the air like a thrown gauntlet. Outside, a demolition crew was unloading equipment from trucks. The neighborhood watched from windows and doorsteps, helpless and afraid. They'd seen this before. They knew how it ended. Kang's expression didn't change. "Mrs. Carter, I admire your courage." "I do. But courage without wisdom is just stubbornness. And stubbornness Won't save your bakery. He gestured to one of his men, who opened the briefcase and pulled out a stack of legal documents. Everything is in order. The permits, the approvals, the demolition license. You have no legal recourse left. You have no options. You have 1 hour. Mrs. Carter took a step forward. Then another. She walked right up to Chairman Kong, close enough that his bodyguards tensed, close enough that she could see her reflection in his cold, dark eyes. She looked up at him with an expression that was impossible to read. Then she spoke. And her voice was quiet but clear as a bell. My granddaughter has your birthmark. The world stopped. The bodyguards froze. The young woman behind the counter stopped breathing. Outside, the demolition crew kept working. Oblivious. But inside the bakery, time itself seemed to pause, caught on those 6 impossible words. Kang's face showed nothing. Years of brutal negotiations, violent power. Struggles, life-or-death decisions had taught him to control every micro-expression, every tell. But something flickered behind his eyes. Something dangerous. Explain, he said. The word came out sharp as broken glass. Mrs. Carter's hand trembled slightly, but her voice stayed steady. The crescent-shaped mark. Just below the jawline. On the right side. Your daughter had it. My granddaughter has it too. The silence that followed was suffocating. Kang's jaw clenched. His hands, which had been relaxed at his sides, slowly curled into fists. When he spoke again, his voice was soft and deadly. My daughter is dead. She died 17 years ago in a hospital fire in Busan. Her body was never recovered, but she's dead. She has been dead for 17 years. So whatever game you're playing, whatever desperate lie you've concocted to save your bakery, I suggest you end it now. I'm not lying, Mrs. Carter said. She reached into her apron pocket and pulled out her phone. Her fingers, gnarled with arthritis, moved slowly across the screen. Then she turned it toward Kong. This is Aaliyah. My granddaughter. She's 17 years old. The photo showed a young woman with warm brown skin and bright eyes, laughing at something off camera. She stood in front of a display of cupcakes, flour on her cheek, joy radiating from her like sunlight. And there, just visible below her jawline on the right side, was a small crescent-shaped birthmark. Kong stared at the screen. The bakery was silent except for the hum of the refrigerator case and the distant sound of the demolition equipment. Outside. He looked at the photo for 10 seconds. 20. 30. Then he reached out and took the phone from Mrs. Carter's hand. She let him. He zoomed in on the birthmark, studying it with the intensity of a man examining evidence at a crime scene. Where did she come from? His voice was barely a whisper. My daughter, Sarah, was a nurse. She worked overseas, different hospitals, different countries. In 2008, she was working at a private medical facility in South Korea. There was a fire. An explosion. She helped evacuate patients. Mrs. Carter paused, her eyes distant with memory. She found a baby in the chaos. Wrapped in a blanket, alone in a room. No name tag. No records. The facility was being destroyed. People were dying. Sarah made a choice. She brought the baby home with her. That's impossible, Kong said, but there was no conviction in his voice. You're describing an international kidnapping. I'm describing a woman who saved a child's life, Mrs. Carter corrected. Gently. Sarah tried to find the baby's family. She made inquiries. Contacted authorities. But there was nothing. The hospital records were destroyed. The facility had been operating partially off the books. The baby had no documentation, no identity. So Sarah brought her to me. And when Sarah died, one of Kang's bodyguards cleared his throat. Sir, this could be a setup. A con. The birthmark could be makeup, a tattoo. Be quiet, Kang said without looking at him. He handed the phone back to Mrs. Carter. The hospital. What was it called? I don't remember the exact name. It was 17 years ago, and it's gone now. But Sarah kept records. Documents. Photos from that time. Everything she had, I kept. In case Aaliyah ever wanted to find out where she came from. Kang turned to the man with the briefcase. Call the crews. Tell them to stop. Tell them to pack up and leave. Sir. The man looked confused. Did I stutter? Stop the demolition. Now. Kang's voice cut like a knife. The man pulled out his phone and started making calls, stepping toward the door. Kang turned back to Mrs. Carter. His eyes were hard. Calculating, but there was something else there too. Something that might have been hope, or might have been fear. I want those documents. All of them. I want to see everything your daughter kept. And I want a DNA sample. I'll give you the documents, Mrs. Carter said. But you'll get that DNA sample over my dead body. Not until I know what you want with my granddaughter. Not until I know you're not going to hurt her. Hurt her. Kang's laugh was bitter and empty. Mrs. Carter, if what you're saying is true, if there's even a chance, then, he stopped. Composed himself. When he spoke again, his voice was controlled but strained. If you're lying to me, if this is some elaborate scheme to save your bakery, I will erase everything you love from this earth. Your bakery, your home, every memory of you and yours. Do you understand me? I understand, Mrs. Carter said calmly. And if you're the man people say you are, if you're the kind of man who would hurt an innocent girl just because you could, then I've already lost everything that matters. Anyway. They stared at each other, this crime lord and this baker, locked in a battle of wills that had nothing to do with property or permits or power. Outside, the demolition crews were loading equipment back onto trucks, confused and irritated. Neighbors peered from windows, trying to understand what was happening. And in the back room of the bakery, completely unaware of any of this, Aaliyah Carter hummed along to music on her headphones while she piped frosting onto chocolate cupcakes for tomorrow's orders. Kang stepped back. You have 24 hours to gather those documents. I'll send someone to collect them. Someone you can trust. Not these men. He gestured vaguely at his bodyguards. Someone neutral. A lawyer, maybe. Your choice. And the DNA? Mrs. Carter asked. We'll discuss that after I see the documents. If they're convincing, we'll arrange something. Supervised. Medical professional present. All above board. He paused at the door. Does she know about any of this? She knows she was adopted. She knows her origins are unclear. She doesn't know about you. And she's not going to. Not yet. Not until I know what kind of man you really are. Kong nodded slowly. Then he left, his bodyguards following like shadows. The door chimed again as it closed. Mrs. Carter stood perfectly still. For a long moment, then her knees buckled. She caught herself on the counter, breathing hard. The young woman from behind the register rushed over. Mrs. Carter. Are you okay? What just happened? What did you say to him? I just played the only card I had left, Mrs. Carter whispered. God help us if I'm wrong. Chairman Kang's empire had been built on three principles: information, intimidation, and absolute certainty. He never made a move without knowing all the variables. He never showed weakness. And he never, ever let emotion cloud his judgment. These principles had kept him alive. Through 2 assassination attempts, a gang war that left 17 men dead, and a hostile takeover that should have ended with him at the bottom of the harbor. But as his SUV pulled away from Maple Street, those principles felt like distant memories. His hands were shaking. Shaking. He pressed them against his thighs, willing them to stop. His bodyguards sat in careful silence, knowing better than to speak when the chairman was in this kind of mood. In the front seat, his driver kept his eyes on the road and his thoughts to himself. Kang's mind was racing, pulling up memories he'd buried 17 years ago. The hospital. The private facility he'd used because he didn't trust public hospitals, because he'd made too many enemies, because protection meant privacy and privacy meant survival. He remembered his daughter's birth. He remembered holding her, this tiny, perfect thing, and feeling something he hadn't felt since childhood, pure, uncomplicated joy. He remembered the birthmark, that small crescent moon just below her jawline. The nurses had said it was distinctive, rare. The doctors said it would fade. It never did. And then he remembered the call. The explosion. Racing to the hospital. To find it engulfed in flames, fire crews pouring water onto the inferno, survivors being carried out on stretchers. He remembered his advisor, Kim, pulling him back, telling him it was too dangerous. Telling him the baby had been in the East Wing, telling him there was no way anyone in that section survived. He remembered the body count. 43 dead. And he remembered Kim, loyal Kim, who had been with him since Busan, telling him quietly, privately, that his daughter's body had been identified among the casualties. Except they'd never actually shown him a body. At the time, he'd been too destroyed to question it. The explosion had been ruled an accident. A gas leak, terrible but not suspicious. He'd had the hospital administrator investigated anyway, found nothing. Eventually, he'd let it go. Let her go. Buried the grief under layers of rage and work and carefully controlled violence. Take me to the office, he said suddenly. And call Kim. Tell him I need to see him. Immediately. The driver nodded. One of the bodyguards made the call. Kong stared out the window, watching the city blur past. 17 years. 17 years of believing his daughter was dead. 17 years of being harder, colder, more ruthless than he'd ever planned to be. Because what was the point of anything else? What was the point of mercy or kindness? Or second chances when the universe had taken the one pure thing in his life and turned it to ash? But if Mrs. Carter was telling the truth, if there was even a possibility, then everything changed. Kim was waiting in Kang's private office when they arrived, looking nervous. Kim was in his 60s now, silver-haired and sharp-eyed. Kang's right hand for over 20 years. He stood when Kang entered, bowing slightly. "Chairman, I came as quickly as I could. Is something wrong?" Kang walked to his desk, opened a drawer, and pulled out a file. It was old, the edges worn, the label faded, hospital incident, 2008. He'd kept it all these years, though he hadn't looked at it in over a decade. He opened it now, flipping through reports, photos, documentation. Then he looked up at Kim. "The hospital fire," Kang said quietly. "Tell me again what happened." Kim's face went very still. "Chairman. Tell me what happened. Every detail. Start from the beginning." Kim hesitated. Then, slowly, he began to speak. The gas leak. The explosion. The casualties. The identification of the bodies. Kang listened, his face expressionless, his eyes never leaving Kim's face. When Kim finished, Kang was quiet for a long moment. "You said my daughter's body was identified," Kang said. "Who identified it?" "The hospital staff. The coroner. Not me. I never saw her body. You were too distraught. I thought it would be better." "You thought," Kang repeated softly. He stood up, walked around the desk, and stood in front of Kim. "Tell me something, old friend. Is my daughter dead?" The silence stretched between them like a chasm. Kim's face had gone pale. His hands trembled slightly. When he spoke, his voice was barely a whisper. "What have you heard? Answer the question." Kim closed his eyes. When he opened them again, they were wet. "No," he whispered. "No, she's not dead." The words hit Kang like a physical blow. He stepped back, his breath coming short and fast. For a moment, the world tilted, reality shifting on its axis. Then fury rose in him like a wave, hot and consuming. His hand shot out, grabbing Kim by the collar, slamming him against the wall. "What did you do?" "I saved her." Kim gasped. "They were going to kill her. The Choi faction, they knew about the baby, they were going to use her to get to you. I had no choice." "So you told me she was dead?" Kang's voice was deadly quiet now, more dangerous than shouting. "You let me believe my daughter was dead for 17 years. To protect her. To protect you." Kim's eyes were desperate. The war was escalating. You had enemies everywhere. If they knew she was alive, if they knew where she was, they would have used her. They would have tortured her, killed her, sent you pieces of her to break you. I couldn't let that happen. So I arranged the explosion. Made it look like an accident. Had her smuggled out of the country by someone I trusted. Someone outside our world who would keep her safe and hidden. "A nurse," Kang said, understanding dawning. "An American nurse named Sarah Carter." Kim nodded, sagging against the wall. "She was good. Honest. Working at the hospital on a temporary visa. I paid her, but not much. Enough to take care of the baby, not enough to draw attention. I told her the baby's parents had died, that there were no other relatives, that I was trying to keep her safe from dangerous people." Which was true. All of it was true. Kang released him, stepping back. His mind was reeling. "You've been tracking her all this time?" You know where she is? No. Kim shook his head. Sarah disappeared shortly after arriving in the States. I lost track of them. It was safer that way. For everyone. I swear to you, Chairman, I never meant to cause you pain. I only wanted to keep your daughter safe. And I did. She's alive. She's grown. She's safe. She's in a bakery on Maple Street, Kong said hollowly. The very bakery I was about to demolish this morning. The universe has a sick sense of humor. Kim's eyes widened. The Carter property? That's where, he stopped. Does she know who you are? No. And she's not going to. Not yet. Not until I figure out what to do about this. Kong walked to the window, staring out at the city. I need a DNA test. Discreet. Accurate. Fast. I can arrange it, Kim said quickly. But Chairman, there's something else you need to know. The Choi faction. They're not gone. They're weakened, yes, but still operational. And they have long memories. If they find out your daughter is alive, then they'll come for her, Kong finished. Which means I need to move fast. Get me that DNA test. And double the security on Maple Street. Discreet surveillance only. I don't want her to know she's being watched. Yes, sir. Kim paused at the door. Chairman, I know you're angry. You have every right to be. But I need you to understand. Everything I did because I was loyal to you. Because I loved that little girl like she was my own. I would die before I let anything happen to her. Kong didn't turn around. Then prove it. Get me that test. And pray you're right about all of this. Because if you're not, if this goes wrong, if anything happens to her because of what you did, then loyalty won't save you. Nothing will save you. Kim left. Kong stood alone in his office, the city sprawling below him. And for the first time in 17 years, he let himself feel something other than cold, calculated control. He let himself feel hope. And it terrified him. The DNA results arrived 3 days later. Kong sat in his office, the envelope on his desk, unopened. For 10 minutes, he just stared at it. This thin piece of paper that would either confirm the impossible or prove him a fool. His hand trembled as he reached for it. He stopped. Took a breath. Reached again. The envelope tore easily. Inside, a single sheet of paper. Technical language. Percentages. Genetic markers. And at the bottom, in clear, unambiguous terms, probability of paternity, 99.98%. Kong set the paper down carefully, precisely. Then he stood up, walked to the window, and for the first time since he was a child, he cried. Silent tears that he wiped away quickly, professionally. But they kept coming. His daughter. His daughter was alive. Aaliyah Carter, who baked cupcakes and dreamed of culinary school, who had no idea that her biological father was one of the most dangerous men on the East Coast, was alive. He should have felt joy. He did feel joy, fierce and overwhelming. But he also felt terror. Because Kim was right. If the Choi faction learned about Aaliyah, she would become a target. And there was another problem. One even Kim didn't know about. One of Kang's own people had been leaking information to the Choi faction for months. Kong had been Hunting the mole, playing a careful game of cat and mouse. But he hadn't found them yet. Which meant any information about Aaliyah, any hint of her existence, could be compromised. He needed to protect her. But how? He couldn't reveal himself without putting her in danger. He couldn't pull her into his world without destroying her life. He couldn't. His phone buzzed. A text from his head of security, situation at Maple Street. Need you here now. Kong was in the car before the phone hit his desk. The drive to Maple Street took 12 minutes. It felt like hours. When they arrived, the scene was controlled chaos. Police cars, an ambulance, neighbors gathered in worried clusters. And in front of the bakery, Mrs. Carter stood talking to a detective, her face drawn and terrified. Kong was out of the car before it fully stopped. He strode toward Mrs. Carter, ignoring the detective's protest. What happened? Mrs. Carter looked at him with eyes that had aged 10 years in 3 days. Aaliyah, she whispered. She's gone. They took her. The world tilted. Kong gripped Mrs. Carter's arm, not hard, but firm enough to keep himself standing. Who? When? How long? 2 hours ago. She was closing up the bakery. I was in the back. I heard her scream, and when I came out, they were pushing her into a van. 3 men. Asian. One of them had a tattoo on his neck, some kind of dragon or Choi faction, Kong said, his voice flat and dead. He pulled out his phone, made a call. Kim. They have her. The Choi faction has my daughter. I need locations, surveillance, everything. I need to know where they took her. And I need it in the next 10 minutes, or I'm burning down every property they own until someone tells me where she is. He hung up. Turned to his security chief. Get everyone. Everyone we have. Full tactical. I don't care about collateral damage, I don't care about exposure, I don't care about anything except getting her back alive. Are we clear? Crystal, sir. The detective stepped forward. Excuse me, but who exactly are you, and what? Kong turned on him with such cold fury that the detective actually stepped back. Detective, I appreciate your dedication to your job. I truly do. But right now, you have a choice. You can either stay out of my way and let me handle this, or you can try to arrest me and waste precious time while that girl suffers. What's it going to be? The detective looked at Mrs. Carter. She nodded slowly. Let him go. She said quietly. He's her father. The detective's eyes widened. He looked at Kong, really looked at him. And whatever he saw there made him step aside. 24 hours, he said. After that, I'm coming for you. If I haven't brought her back in 24 hours, Kong said quietly. You won't need to come for me. I'll already be dead. Kim called back 7 minutes later. Old Warehouse District. The Choi faction has been using it as a secondary base. I've got satellite confirmation of movement in the area. 4 vehicles, approximately 12 men. Chairman, I'm sending you coordinates, but you need to know, this could be a trap. They might be expecting you. I don't care, Kong said. Send me the coordinates. And Kim? Make sure our people know. No one touches her. Anyone who lays a hand on my daughter dies screaming. Pass it on. The warehouse was exactly what Kong expected, crumbling brick, broken windows, the kind of place that appeared on no official maps and had witnessed too many unofficial executions. His convoy pulled up 2 blocks away. Kong stepped out into the cold night air, checking the pistol at his hip. His security chief approached, holding out a bulletproof vest. "No," Kong said. "Sir, this is protocol. If they shoot me, I want to feel it. I want to know I'm still human. Now give me the tactical layout." They went over the plan quickly. 2 teams would hit the side entrances. Kong would go through the front with his personal guards. Sniper coverage on the roof across the street. Extraction vehicles ready. It was professional, efficient, and completely insane. They were outnumbered, going into unknown territory, with no intel on defensive positions. Kong didn't care. His daughter was in there. Nothing else mattered. They hit the warehouse at exactly midnight. The front door came off its hinges with a single ram. Kong went through first, gun raised, and walked directly into hell. Gunfire erupted from 3 positions. His guards returned fire, dropping 2 hostiles immediately. Kong moved through the chaos like he was underwater, everything slow and sharp and crystal clear. He'd done this before, countless times. But never with his hands shaking. Never with his heart threatening to tear itself out of his chest. A man appeared in front of him, raising a weapon. Kong shot him twice. Center mass, didn't slow down. Another hostile, then another. The warehouse was a maze of old machinery and shipping containers. His teams reported in through his earpiece, clearing rooms, neutralizing threats. But no sign of Aaliyah. Then he heard it. A scream. Female. Young. Coming from the 2nd floor. Kong ran. His security chief called after him, but he didn't stop. He took the stairs 3 at a time, his lungs burning, his vision narrowing to a single point. The scream came again, and this time he could hear words. "Let me go. Please. I don't understand." He kicked open the door at the top of the stairs and found himself in an old office. In the center of the room, Aaliyah sat tied to a chair. Tears streaming down her face. 3 men surrounded her. One had a gun. When they saw Kong, the one with the gun grabbed Aaliyah, pressing the barrel against her temple. "Chairman Kong," the man said, smiling. "So glad you could join us. We're just having a conversation with your daughter. She's lovely. Reminds me of you, actually. Same eyes." Kong raised his gun, aimed it at the man's head. His hand was steady. Now. Perfectly steady. "Let her go," he said quietly. "And I'll make your death quick." "I don't think so. See, this is about respect. About reminding you that you're not invincible. About." Kong shot him through the eye. The man dropped like a puppet with cut strings. Before the body hit the floor, Kong had already shifted his aim to the 2nd hostile, firing twice. The 3rd man dove for cover, and that was his mistake. Kong was on him in 2 steps, pistol whipping him across the temple. The man went down hard. Then Kong was at Aaliyah's side, cutting through the ropes with a knife. He pulled from his belt. His hands were gentle, careful not to nick her skin. She was sobbing, hyperventilating, in shock. When the last rope fell away, she threw her arms around him, clinging to him like a drowning person clings to driftwood. It's okay, Kang heard himself saying. You're safe now. I've got you. You're safe. She pulled back, looking at him with wide, terrified eyes. Who are you? She whispered. Why did they call you my father? Gunfire erupted somewhere below them. Kang's earpiece crackled with reports. More hostiles, pouring in from outside. They were running out of time. He took Aaliyah's face in his hands, forcing her to focus on him. Listen to me very carefully. My name is Chairman Kang. I am not a good man. I've done terrible things. But I am your biological father. And right now, I need you to trust me, because I'm going to get you out of here. Can you do that? Can you trust me? She stared at him. Then, slowly, she nodded. Good. Stay close to me. Don't look at anything. Just keep moving. They made it to the stairs. Kang went first, gun raised, Aaliyah pressed against his back. On the ground floor, his security team had established a perimeter, holding off the new wave of hostiles. The security chief saw them and waved them toward the exit. Sir. This way. They ran. Kang kept Aaliyah behind him, shielding her with his body. Someone took a shot from the catwalk above. Kang felt the bullet pass so close it stirred his hair. He fired back, didn't wait to see if he hit. Just kept moving, kept pushing forward, kept his daughter safe. They burst out into the night air. The extraction vehicle was waiting. Engine running. Kang pushed Aaliyah inside, then turned back. His security chief was right behind him, blood streaming from a wound in his shoulder. Sir, we need to go. Everyone out? Yes, sir. All teams accounted for. Kang got in the vehicle. The door wasn't even closed before they were moving, tires screaming against asphalt. Inside, Aaliyah sat in the corner, arms wrapped around herself, shaking uncontrollably. Kang stripped off his jacket and draped it over her shoulders. She didn't acknowledge him. Just stared straight ahead, her eyes blank with shock. They drove to a private medical facility, one Kang owned, staffed by doctors who knew better than to ask questions. Aaliyah was examined. Treated for minor cuts and bruises, given something for the shock. Through it all, she said nothing. Just let them work on her, her eyes distant and hollow. Mrs. Carter arrived an hour later, brought by Kim. She rushed to Aaliyah's side, gathering her granddaughter into her arms, whispering reassurances and prayers. Aaliyah finally broke, sobbing against Mrs. Carter's shoulder, her whole body shaking with the force of it. Kang watched from the doorway, feeling like an intruder at his own rescue operation. When Aaliyah had cried herself out, Mrs. Carter looked up at Kang. Her eyes were hard. We need to talk, she said. Now. They stepped into the hallway. Mrs. Carter waited until the door was closed, then turned on him with fury that would have made lesser men step back. You did this. Your world, your enemies, your violence. You brought this into her life. Yes, Kang said simply. I did. And now what? You think you can just claim her? Make her part of your empire? Turn her into what you are? No. Kang's voice was quiet but firm. No, I would never do that to her. Then what do you want? I want her safe. I want her happy. I want her to have the life she deserves, not the life I've lived. And I want, he stopped, his throat tight. I want her to know that someone loves her. That her father, despite everything he is, despite everything he's done, loves her more than his own life. Mrs. Carter studied him for a long moment. She's not your empire, Mr. Kong. She's not a business asset or a strategic advantage. She's a 17-year-old girl who dreams of opening her own bakery someday. She likes romantic comedies and terrible pop music. She volunteers at the animal shelter every Saturday. She's kind and gentle and good. Everything you're not. I know, Kong said. And that's exactly why I can't be part of her life. Not the way I want to be. Not the way a father should be. So what are you going to do? Kong took a breath. I'm going to end this. All of it. The war with the Choi faction. The threats. The danger. I'm going to eliminate everyone. Who knows about Aaliyah, everyone who might use her to get to me. And then, he paused. And then I'm going to step away. From the organization, from the empire, from everything. I'm going to dismantle it piece by piece, transfer legitimate assets, cut ties with illegal operations. It won't happen overnight, but it will happen. You're going to walk away. Just like that. Not just like that. It'll take time. Years, maybe. But yes. I spent 17 years believing my daughter was dead, building an empire on grief and rage. Now she's alive. And she's more important than any of it. More important than power, money, control. More important than everything. Mrs. Carter's expression softened slightly. And what about her? What does she get? She gets you. She gets the life she's built. She gets to go to culinary school, open her bakery, live without fear. And she gets an anonymous benefactor who will make sure she never wants for anything. A scholarship fund. Financial support. Protection she'll never see. Everything I can give her without corrupting who she is. You're going to be a ghost father. I'm going to be whatever she needs me to be. Even if that means being nothing at all. Mrs. Carter sighed. You know, 17 years ago, when Sarah brought that baby to me, I thought we were saving her from something terrible. I never imagined we were also saving you. You didn't save me, Kong said quietly. You saved her. And maybe, if I work hard enough, if I change enough, someday I'll deserve to meet her properly. As a man, not a monster. As a father, not a crime lord. 6 months later, Aaliyah Carter stood in front of Le Cordon Bleu. Acceptance letter in hand, scholarship fully funded by an anonymous donor. Mrs. Carter stood beside her, beaming with pride. Neither of them noticed the silver-haired man in the expensive suit watching from across the street, a slight smile on his face. Chairman Kong watched his daughter laugh at something her grandmother said, and for the first time in 20 years, he felt something close to peace. The empire was smaller now. Cleaner. Most of the illegal operations had been shut down or transferred to legitimate businesses. The Choi faction was gone, eliminated in a brutal month-long campaign that would be talked about in underworld circles for decades. And Kong himself was different. Quieter. Less interested in power, more interested in redemption. He still didn't know if Aaliyah would ever want to meet him. Mrs. Carter had told her the truth, carefully and gently, and Aaliyah had needed time to process it. Time to decide what, if anything, she wanted from the man who was her father by blood but a stranger in every other way. That mattered. Kong respected that. Respected her right to make that choice. For now, he was content to watch from a distance. To know she was safe. To know she was happy. To know that even if he never got to be part of her life, she was alive and thriving and everything good he'd once hoped to be. His phone buzzed. A text from Kim, everything in place for the community center groundbreaking. Carter's bakery will remain untouched. The whole block will be preserved as historic district. Kong smiled and typed back a simple reply, good. Across the street, Aaliyah and Mrs. Carter headed into the culinary school for orientation. Kong stayed where he was for another moment. Memorizing the image of his daughter's joy, banking it like precious fuel against the long work ahead. Then he turned and walked away, back to his car, back to his empire, back to the slow, careful work of becoming someone worthy of the word father. The black SUV pulled away from the curb and disappeared into traffic. Inside the culinary school, Aaliyah Carter learned to make croissants from scratch, unaware that somewhere in the city, a man who had built an empire on blood and fear was tearing it all down, one piece at a time. For love of a daughter who might never call him father. And maybe that was enough. Maybe that was redemption. Or maybe it was just the beginning.